Hi everyone and welcome back to Hit Your Numbers. Before we get into this week's episode, I just want to remind everyone, if you are listening to this on the day that it comes out, we have a Discovery Masterclass happening on the 18th of September. This is a free masterclass by James Bissell himself. Just go to therevenueenabler.com, check out the Learning Hub on the main menu, and you will see masterclasses. Go there and find all the information you need about this masterclass, but you are not going to want to miss it. Right, on with the show.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast, where we're going to be talking about recruiting, ramping, and progressing SDRs today. Really excited for the conversation. Just before we jump into the episode, why don't you give the listeners maybe just a really quick intro into who you are, maybe a bit about your experience and the exciting organization that you're building over there at the moment, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Oyin Bamgbose. I'm the VP of Sales at Street Group. I've spent the last decade in SaaS sales leadership. I started as an SDR myself. So back in 2015, started an SDR. And then, of course, I get to do what I do today, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a massive privilege. So most recently, building, scaling high-performing sales teams across enterprise and mid-market, including SDR teams as well. My role today is about creating, a predictable growth engine. So putting those structures in place, accountability, putting a culture in place so that our team can consistently deliver, right? And I'm passionate about developing talent, especially SDRs, because again, that's my journey. I was an SDR back in 2015 and look at what I get to do today. So I believe SDRs are not just there to book meetings, they're the future leaders, I believe, of the sales organization. So I'm excited to share what I've learned about hiring, motivating, and progressing salespeople as companies move through those different stages of growth, if you will. I'd also add to that, I guess, in terms of Street Group. So I now work for Street Group, and Street Group, we are the market leader in prospecting and CRM technology for estate agents. So we are truly revolutionizing the space with some of the tech that we are providing. It's so interesting because in my first week, when I joined the business, we had a large estate agent come to our office to obviously get a demo and have a conversation about our CRM solution. And at the end of this meeting, so firstly, this meeting, you're talking like 5 hours, right? Like they spent almost half a day with us in our office in Manchester. And at the end of it, the chief operations officer says, I didn't know you guys existed. This is unbelievable technology, which I didn't know existed. So that alone, I was like, wow, I have come to the right place. If one of the largest estate agents in the country comes to our office, spends 5 hours with us, and at the end of it has such a remark, I was like, wow, we really are, revolutionizing the space. And since then, pretty much every conversation and every room I've been in, that's been the reaction as well. So it's a very exciting time. We're growing rapidly. We're the fourth fastest growing company in the Northwest. It's voted by GP Bullhound. So yeah, it's a really exciting time to be part of Street Group.
Yeah, sounds super exciting. Sounds like you've joined at the perfect time as well. And it's cool when we don't always get that opportunity, but when you present something to somebody, I remember when I was selling HR tech, and I remember this VP of HR said, I actually didn't think there was tech for this. I thought this was like something we always would have to do on spreadsheets. And that's special, right? And those are usually the ones that you want to grab with both hands and like really obsess over because they can go places. Love that. And I think, what we're going to talk about today is, I guess, something that you're, really, skilled up in. But you mentioned culture early in developing people. I think that's the key part to building that, predictable growth engine you mentioned, right? Like once we figure out the most optimal way to go to market and acquire customers, I now just need to hire the SDRs who are the future of the company, right? But also then how do we then progress those into account executives to go out and help us win more customers? So with that in mind, then let's talk about recruiting first, because you're recruiting at the moment for an SDR. So when it comes to kind of getting ready to start building a job description and talent pooling and things like that, what do you currently look for in an SDR for your business to be successful?
So I hire for behaviors first, and I'm looking for 3 core attributes in an SDR. I want someone who's curious. right? That sort of curiosity is super important. Someone who's resilient, and then lastly, coachable. So those are the three core attributes I'm looking for. And SDRs, they're on the front. They're on the front line, so they need the energy to pick up the phone X amount of times a day, to continue that prospecting X amount of times, X amount of activities a day, right? It's super consistent. They need to have the curiosity to ask why, as many times as possible, just generally. And I don't mean that just when they're in front of prospects, but internally as well. They have to understand why we are structured in the way that we are. They need to ask questions about the product, of course, why the product works in a specific type of way. They just need to be curious about everything that's going on around them. Again, you're talking about green individuals, first timers coming into business, generally speaking, right? So that curiosity is super important as a core trait for, I guess, a future leader as well. And then naturally, as the last thing, when we talk about coachability, is the humility to take feedback and improve quickly, right? So if you have someone that has those traits, as far as I'm concerned, I can teach them the rest, right? I feel like the rest just comes with the territory. So those are the things I'm looking for. I'm always looking for behaviors first, and the interview process and everything that's wrapped around that is structured to try and figure out if this individual has those three core attributes first and foremost, before we look for, I guess, anything else.
I love that you can actually define it as well, and then add some meat to the bone. Because I speak to a lot of sales leaders with the business that I run, and I'm like, "What are you looking for?" And it's the classic: "We're looking for rock stars or A players." And I'm like, "Cool. So is everybody else. What's your definition?" Right? And they might say curiosity, and then I'm like, "Well, cool. How are you assessing for that? How are you
Mhm.
qualifying for that during the interview process to ensure that you avoid a mishire? Because that can be really expensive." And um, they don't they kind of don't have a plan to do that. And I think if you're a sales leader listening to this, I think this is kind of one of the mistakes that I made early on in my kind of sales leadership role. Is I was like, I read a bunch of books and like, they need to be curious, they need to be accountable, they need to be able to adapt and
Mm.
actually implement the feedback and the coaching. And I was like, cool. Like, I would just ask these people, like, are you curious when you're out selling? And they're obviously going to say yes.
Yeah.
And I had no real framework to qualify if they were. So I just advanced them. And guess what? I hired a bunch of people that weren't fit for our context and that weren't curious. So it's a lesson learned, expensive one, right?
It's it's an interesting point you're making, because you said that, right. As leaders, that is our job, to be able to clearly, I guess, articulate a lot of these things. Mainly for me, I focus on the why. Like when you're talking to the sales organization for why we do anything, any new process you're trying to introduce, any new ways of working, I always start with the why, right? It's the famous Simon Sinek book, Start With Why.
Yeah.
I spend as much time as I can developing that why for any sort of new process or new method that I think is going to be relevant. I spend as much time as I can helping everyone understand the why, because I feel like with the why, you generally then attract people who also believe the same things. So those who also believe the same things just become the natural followers of that. And then they become the natural custodians of it. And then off you go. So yeah, I spend as much time as possible figuring out the why, and then I feel like the rest tends to take care of itself.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, just setting up shop right, getting your operating system in place, and then you can just run with it. And I think if there's an SDR listening that's in market looking for a role, maybe is going to reach out afterwards. Like, it is really important that you think long and hard about how you're going to sell back to these characteristics, these traits that sales leaders are looking for. Because if you don't, you might actually possess them, but just don't do a very good job of articulating them. It's just like when we're selling. We
Yeah,
might add great value to our customers, but if we haven't been taught how to actually talk about value, in this case, I'm curious, not just externally, but I love this internal thinking.
100%.
Why do we do it this way? That's okay to ask that question. Let's challenge it, people in each other internally. There's a
Agreed.
book I read a long time ago. I think this was from this book called The Curiosity Manifesto. And what this guy says in there is that I've got an 18-month-old boy, so he's not at that stage yet. But apparently, like, up to the age of 6, kids ask 126 questions on average per day. What's this? What's that? Why are we doing this? When are we going to get there? All of this, right? And what he found was that I think, like, adults over the age of like 30 or something, they ask up to 6 per day.
We start to think we know.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And we stop being curious. And I think that's what, really hurts organizations. And that's why you'll find, like, if you're an SDR and AE, listen to this, like, a lot of leaders are now really qualifying you, like you're qualifying your prospects on, are you actually curious? Are you actually coachable?
Yeah. Agree.
And I guess you've got a scorecard that you're using when you're interviewing people, and like using data to inform your decisions and things like that.
Yeah, we do. We have it all built into Team Taylor. So Team Taylor is like the HR software that we use. So we have all the questions plus the scoring mechanism built into Team Taylor. Clearly, and again, we've grouped the questions to inform the attributes that we are interviewing for as well. So you've got the specific attribute and then the questions and the role play, if necessary, that sort of fleshes that out. So yeah, and then the scoring mechanism within all of that. So yeah, we've got that built out.
Amazing. Yeah, sounds good. And you mentioned something there about assessments. So let's talk about assessments. So you mentioned role play. I guess you're using these assessments then to really kind of validate and strongly qualify if this person actually has those behaviors, has those skills, right? Typical assessments that you're running with an SDR at the moment, what are you finding is working well?
Yeah, so I don't want to give everything away, of course, but I tend to keep it practical,
Okay.
short role play to handle objections. There's also even a writing exercise to see how they communicate in email. So again, I'm not testing for perfection here. I'm just testing for structure, adaptability, effort, that sort of thing. But I'll speak to those 3 core attributes, right? So coachability, the way we test for that is we ask them to role play a discovery call. And I do this pretty much every time. Is midway I'd stop them and just give them some feedback, then ask them to run it again. Sometimes I do it at the end and give them feedback and then ask them to run it again. In fact, there was one guy who's in our team now who super, super, super impressed me, where at the end of it, he asked me for feedback. Straight when the role
Nice.
play was done, he asked me for feedback. I gave him the feedback, and guess what he says? Okay, do you mind if I just do that again with your... I was like, oh.
Love that. That's exciting, right?
Super exciting just to have someone like that, right? So again, yeah, I'll ask them to role play the discovery call. I'll stop them. I'll give them feedback, then ask them to run it again. If they don't, but obviously if they're proactive and do that, that's amazing. And what am I looking for? Have they applied their feedback immediately? Do they get defensive? Or do they sort of like lean in and adjust? And, that's what I'm looking for. So yeah, I think coachability shows up in how quickly someone can adapt, not how perfectly like they perform it the first time. And I think that's super important. So with regards to the next one, which would be like, the curiosity, which we've been talking about, I just asked them to sell me something unfamiliar. So usually street, right? I'd ask, like, what I'm trying to understand is what be your approach selling our product if you knew nothing about it? It's just the approach I'm looking for. So, and generally speaking, do they start asking me questions to understand it a little bit more before they jump into their pitch? Do they show genuine interest in learning it? And I'm always curious to understand their approach. How do you go about learning? Visual learner? Are you videos? Are you books? That kind of thing. I'm trying to figure that out in that type of conversation. So I feel like in that exercise, before they pitch, I'm hoping and what I'm looking for is that they are asking a lot of questions and asking a few whys before they then go in and pitch to me. So that's typically what I'm looking for in terms of that curiosity. And it kind of speaks to a bit of, there's a part of that that's also brave, I feel, because there's an aspect of that where you might feel, oh, I need to know the answers. I'm in an interview setting. But the confidence to be able to ask the questions and be, again, slightly vulnerable. I don't know. So can I just ask, find out, etc.? It's so genuine and refreshing if someone can approach it in that way, as opposed to feeling like they need to have the answers and I need to know everything. And I think there's something to be said for that. And then the last one again would be resilience. So yeah, I just probe into setbacks. That one's pretty standard and straightforward, right? You're just probing into setbacks. Tell me about a time you've missed target if they're previous SDR. What did you do the next day? How did you overcome that? Or I'll throw in if they're brand new SDR, i.e. green, graduate or that sort of thing. I'll just throw in like some tough objections in the role play and see how they respond. So I always go, I enjoy this because I always go into character when we're doing the role play. So sometimes I'd be the miserable guy who you've called me out of the blue, get to the point.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'd be amiable and I'm chatty and I want to have the conversation, but you still won't end up booking, but I'm just having like the conversation with you. So again, how they adjust and do they show composure? Are they persistent? Because I always, even if the conversation's been great, I still always end the role play with send me an email, right? I never give in, like I never give in. So what I'm always looking for there is, are they persistent? Are they trying to problem solve, that sort of thing? Or do they just crumble, give up and say, okay, fine, yeah, I'll send you the email. So I'm just looking for that. And I feel like resilience isn't about getting knocked down. We've heard this time and time again. It's about how quickly you can reset and go again. So with our SDRs currently, our objection handle is a very typical standard objection handle playbook, which is your feel, felt, found.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously, naturally, you don't hear that when we're handling the objection, but it is still the feel, felt, found. And what I love most, the best SDRs, is they're so case study driven. They're so reference driven. Everything is about how whatever you're telling me, Mr. Customer, isn't new. Like others have felt the same way. Others had these sort of challenges, but this is how we managed it. And this is the result they got from it. And even just pushing that consistently around, leveraging case studies to make the point. I love that. They go on our website, they read all the case studies, they push marketing for more case studies, they push the AEs and say, hey, can we not get a case study out of this client that we've just won? Things like that, right? So they're consistently asking those questions around, we want as many customer stories as possible, because that allows me to handle all of the different objections that we can get, and I love that. So yeah, those are the three ways and the ways in which we, assess those three qualities specifically.
Really, really love that, and thanks for putting a bit more meat on the bone there. A couple of things that I really like is I like the objections kind of role play part, because obviously a big part of the SDR role is picking up the phone and doing the things that most people aren't prepared to do, which is cool. I love the copywriting part, like getting them to do some kind of writing assessment, because again, internally it's important to like manage up effectively and be able to be a good writer, but also attention spans are at an all-time low. Like I googled it the other day, what's the average attention span in 2025? It's like 8.25 seconds, down from 12 seconds a few years ago. So it was never great, but it's even worse now, and that's because of like TikTok and things like that. Everybody's just trying to grab our attention, right? So being a really good copywriter is such a critical selling skill, I think, in 2025, and I don't see that changing. It's probably going to become even more important. So again, being able to assess and test to avoid 3 months in role going, do you know what, I don't think this was the right hire, and you've now lost months and months of time of pipeline and revenue, and also probably internal reputation. If you do it a few times as a sales leader, it can be damaging, right? So
agreed. You don't really want to get that wrong. Speaking of attention span, I heard very recently that the goldfish actually have a higher attention span than humans these days. So we're battling with the goldfish and we're losing. Goldfish are winning.
That's terrifying, isn't it? Right? Yeah, we're pretty advanced beasts, so we can't even defeat a goldfish. So worrying. I also love the testing of the coachability. So pausing at any moment they're not prepared for it, giving them some feedback and seeing if they can apply. Because I guess your thinking here is probably fairly similar to mine, which is cool. We've been role playing for 7 minutes. If I can give this person some feedback, they can take it on board and apply it, and we can do this in like a 20-minute interview. What can I do with that person in the first 90 days? Like that's then giving me confidence, because again, my view on sales leadership is my primary job is to build a team of elite salespeople. They're all going to have skill gaps. That's fine. My job is to close them and ultimately retire myself. So if this person is coachable, I'm thinking I'm going to be in the trenches helping these people every day. What can I do in 30 days with this person? If I'm struggling in 7 minutes, I'm going to probably struggle in the next 30 days. So,
but as well as that, you talk about as sales leaders, our job is to close those skill gaps. Build an elite sales team, build the frameworks for how we operate. So, for example, with our cold calling, we use the 4 I's framework, right? Okay. So that's introduction, insight, inspire, and invest. Right? In my opinion, that's the anatomy of a cold call. Is you introduce yourself, you got to grab their attention as quickly as you can. So that intro is super important. Then it's insight, providing some sort of insight, which is whether it's I've been on your website, or I know X and Y about your business, or I've spoken to your sales progressors before and they've talked about this specific challenge, whatever the case may be, but you're providing some sort of insight, right? So that's insight. And then after that, it's inspire. So inspire is kind of like your elevator pitch. So if you've been able to intro yourself and provide some really good insight, inspire is now the time where you've earned the right to then go into your pitch as to how we solve those challenges I've just talked about, or how we are, I guess, revolutionizing the estate agency space and saving people time and being more efficient, or whatever the case may be, right? That bit, the inspire that's the section. And then finally it's invest. This is the bit where you then ask for something, whether it's ask for their time or you want to send them something that they can read, etc. It's that sort of thing. So because we follow the 4 Eyes framework, I'm generally looking for that in the role play. Now, naturally, they won't necessarily always follow that framework, but where they don't, that's where I interject and give some of that feedback and talk to them about the framework, and then ask them to kind of go again with that sort of like framework in mind and see how they adjust and what they think about it. There've been interesting responses to that. I've had a rep go, okay, that's very interesting. I've never thought of a cold call in that way. Didn't even realize there was a structure to a cold call. Can I have 5 minutes just to rethink my pitch and then come back to you and like go again? Yes.
100%.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's what I want to hear.
That's exactly what I want to hear. Just give me a few minutes. Let me just get my head around what you just said there. This is interesting. And then off we go. And I think that in itself sells that working relationship. It sells our company and what we're trying to build. We're not, when we talk about building that elite sales team, one of the factors or one of the key attributes of an elite sales team is they don't wing anything, right? There's a framework for how they operate. And within that framework, that's where all of the autonomy is. So as an SDR, if you think about that framework, how you introduce yourself, play around with that, test that, right? You've got autonomy to test and try things. Insight, the type of insight you provide doesn't have to be the same every single time. You can test and play around with that. Inspire, again, when you think about your elevator pitch, you can test, and so again, the autonomy there is super important. But I think all of that, in that one small section, I think, yeah, we're demonstrating why you also want to work here, what's possible when you work here as well, some of the things you can learn if you come and join us, but also at the same time, they're also demonstrating that they're coachable.
100%. And this comes back to what you said at the very beginning, which is around culture. Like you have to foster that culture and create that safe space. And if you're recruiting, you have to assume, like you are when you're selling, they're speaking to other vendors, they're speaking to other organizations about SDR roles. And our job isn't just to disqualify or qualify in a candidate. Our job is to also sell them on the mission and the opportunity. So you need to inspire them to come for the ride. And I see so many sales leaders just like tick in a box and go, right, that's the end of the interview. Any questions? I've got 2 minutes. All right. And then I'm out of here. And actually, you don't know, I might be going into an interview with MongoDB that's going to pay me, 50% more on the salary. And I could have come to work for you because you might have made me feel really comfortable and confident you're going to develop me as a professional, and I'll earn way more long-term with those skills, but you've just lost that opportunity. So yeah, I think that's really important. Inspiring action, not just in a cold call, but like as you're selling the role to the SDR or the AE or whoever you're recruiting for. And I guess what you're doing as well there is you're showing them, like, I'm actually giving you some free coaching right now. Like I'm giving you insights to what it's like to be to report to me. Like if I'm doing this in an interview, can you imagine what I do like in a dedicated 45-minute coaching session every week? And again, that helps sell them on the company, which is what you're trying to do. I love that. I wrote down a couple of other things here. So the curiosity piece, love that. Like how you're testing that. I want you to sell me our business. That actually, one of the other kind of characteristics that I look for when I'm recruiting SDRs specifically is around like preparation. So that helps me understand if I'm like, hey, I want you to pitch me my business. Have they come prepared or are they winging it? If they're winging it, they're probably going to wing the sales process. And there's so much data that shows people that wing sales process typically don't, perform very well.
Consistently. Yeah, find that they don't perform consistently. That's the difference, is they're not as predictable in their outputs. Those who are consistent and more predictable in their outputs just have a method, they have a process, a way of working, which when you are at this stage in our company, if you think about Street, where we are at that scale up stage, you do want process driven sales individuals. You either find them or you have to coach them and develop them into that way of working and into that way of thinking. Whereas when you are a startup, the types of salespeople you need in that phase are just your evangelists, right? You just need the guys who love the product, love the sector, love the space, will chew your head off about it. It's those
Literally.
kinds of individuals you want, because even at a startup, you probably know what I'm talking about here when we talk about the Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, his book. Love that
Yeah.
book. One of my favorite
Yeah.
Bibles. During that startup phase, you're attracting a lot of uh, early adopters and visionary style buyers, right? And so they love to talk to that type of salesperson who just knows the product inside out, understands the space, the why, etc. You get that from the co-founder as well. The co-founders or the owner of the business or whoever started up the business usually has a lot of those types of sales skills. They're pretty much evangelists, right? But when you start to scale up, that's no longer enough, right? You now need to turn that sort of way of selling into a process from start to finish for how you're almost creating a buying experience at that point. And so the best salespeople, the ones who are consistent in their delivery, are so particular about that buying experience. They know how they open that first call with you, some of the rapport builds, how they showcase and start to develop the why for their solution early in the conversation. Some of the research they've done, it's the same every single time. Then the way they showcase the product, how they focus on specific parts initially. Obviously, you're always harkening that back to to the pain points of the customer, etc., and their challenges. You always go to the first one. You speak to that first, and then how they disseminate that to the other parts of the products that they'll show, how they always talk about customer stories for every single feature. They anchor it with a customer story. Like, just, you can see it every single, it's almost like magic when you watch them work, like those types of sales individuals. But yeah, they've got a clear process for how they take you from, I know nothing about your product, to, oh my God, we need to go find budget and get this. We need this.
Yeah.
So yeah, super interesting.
100%. And the thing that I love about sales, and this is the thing that really frustrates me the most with what I do, is that it's all a game of skills. And the cool thing is we can teach all of this. Like, people aren't just born great at multi-threading into different stakeholders and then being able to, like, rally everybody on the mission, build a business case, and like, it's just not happening, I'm afraid. Like, somebody is learning that through their line manager, through outsourcing it to a training or coaching solution or whatever it is, but they are learning those skills. And our job, again, is to help them identify the skill gaps and then work with them on closing them so that they can go on and do great things. So that's why, like, these behaviors are so important, because that is making you feel confident that if I'm going to make that investment in you, I need to make sure that it's going to have an impact. Otherwise, I'm just going to be spinning my wheels and not going anywhere. I think that's so important. Another one I'd love to kind of talk about is like intelligence. So I didn't do very well at school. I had a pretty rough ride, but I can pick things up pretty fast. And what I stopped doing and I made a change in my recruitment process was, at first I'd be like, hey, so these are if you're an SDR, it's a 3-step process.
Right.
Open chat with me today, some kind of assessment, and then a culture kind of final conversation. And they knew what to expect in the second interview. And what I found was they did loads and loads and loads and loads of prep, hours of prep for that assessment. And I wanted to test how quickly they can pick things up. So when I went in to get a job when I was a sales rep at a big telco company, I had no idea what I was doing on the day. I got
Right.
to the office. I'm pretty sure they deliberately broke the elevator. I had to climb 12 flights of stairs. I was knackered by the time I got to the top. And then, like, you're stressed out, right? It's an important interview. And they sat me in this room and said, right, you're going to do a role play for half an hour. Here's a brief. Sit in that room for 15 minutes and build a pitch, discovery questions, point of view, qualification, whatever it is. And then, like, you see over there, and there's like this glass room with like 3 senior sales managers. Those are going to be the CFO, COO, and IT director or something. And you're going to have to go and pitch them and win them over. And I had to, like, on my feet within 15 minutes, do all of this. I'd never sold this tech before. And they were
Right.
testing. They weren't looking for perfection, like you said. They're just testing how quickly can I grasp things? How can I pick things up? Because, again, they're like, cool, I can work with this
Yeah.
person. And that's what I started doing, is, like, in my recruitment playbook, I would bring you onto the Zoom call and I'd say, right, today we're going to do a cold call role play. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. You can turn your camera off, turn your mic off. Here's the brief. This is the buyer persona, the product, etc. Here's your goal. We'll come back at 1:15. We'll do cameras on. We'll roll with the role play. I'm going to give you some feedback, and then we're going to run it again. Sound good to you? Cool. See you in 15 minutes.
Nice.
And they come back, and I could then see how quickly can they pick things up. Where did they go and look in those 15 minutes?
You said you talked about Zoom.
Yeah.
Do you prefer in-person interviews where possible, obviously, versus, I guess, remote interviews? What's your take on that?
Yeah, like definitely the culture one. Like I want to bring you into my environment. I want to see you sit down with some of the reps, because although we say it's a 40-hour week, sometimes it's a bit more than that. And, you probably spend more time in sales with your peers than you do your friends and family. So I need to make sure that you're going to vibe with the team. You guys are going to connect. You can work together when times get tough. So that one for me is a biggie where possible, unless I'm hiring overseas or whatever. But yeah, if you're in the same country, we're gonna get you in the office at the end just to do that final part. But I want to make sure that, again, that person's right for me to bring into my team, because I'm trying to keep reputation with my guys around like we're only bringing in the right fit people. I don't want to upset the team or bring in anybody that's not going to fit. So again, I make sure good qualification through stage 1, stage 2, and then get people in. That's my point of view. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm in person. It's super important in person, I think. Unless, like you say, we're not in the same country. But if we are, we've got to get them into our environment. Got to meet them in person. So yeah, in person. That's my
I think it's
preference.
important for the rep as well, right? So that they can see what they're coming in. I actually had once a rep say, now that I've been through the process and I've met some of the team, I'm just a little bit nervous that, my interests and things like that aren't really aligned to the reps that you've got. We were a small team at the time.
Yeah.
Most of them were into like football and rugby, and this person was more into like art and, history and things like that. And they were like, I just feel like I didn't really connect with the team. And I think that's so important to figure that out before we go through the onboarding process, right? That person could have just walked away from the job, come to work here, and then, really felt like they couldn't connect with the team. And that's a big part of what we do.
That's so interesting. But when you start to once your team grows and gets to a different, I guess a bigger size, it's hard to maintain that level of the culture, that specific level, like down to that level. Like it's hard to maintain that. So yeah, I've always enjoyed having that diverse team, if you will, and then trying to still make that work. But it's a diverse team, but using everyone's sort of like qualities and bringing that together. It's so interesting. Very recently, actually, I had an interview with a guy, and obviously before the call, we're talking about ROI, right? Had an interview with a new sales rep that we just brought into the business. And one of the things that stood out, like he was great, interviewed really well. But one of the things that stood out is he kept anchoring all of his messaging with numbers and ROI, which we did, since I've joined, we're building that. We're in the midst of building that inside of the team at the moment. So it was just great to say, okay, this is someone who already thinks in this way, has experience building this sort of thing. He can definitely bring this into the team. Now, I kid you not, he's been in the business now. This week is his 4th week. And he's already showing me, he showed me yesterday his ROI calculator that he's built. And I was like, I never told him that's why we hired him, right? But I was like, oh my God, he's already thinking in that way. Like this has actually come true. He was like, May, I've built this ROI calculator. What do you think? Because I want to make sure every time I talk, because he's got his exam coming up. Exam meaning like he has to pitch, do a discovery call and an actual pitch to me and take me through a demo of our platform, etc. before we get him speaking to customers, right? So he's got that coming up on Thursday. And he'd already done this. So he was showing me the ROI calculator and he wants to use that on Thursday. This is brand new. We don't have this in the team. We've not rolled this out to the team. So I was like, yes, get it.
Love that. That's so good. And look, I don't know if how you feel about this, but I'm okay with hiring people that are better than me at certain things. Like my job as a leader isn't to be the best at everything, because then what ends up happening is everyone looks to me. Again, this was a lesson that I learned early in my VP role, which was I kind of set the shop up really badly. I was like, hey, I've been here since, employee number 7. I've done the last 30 deals. here's a HubSpot dashboard with my 70% win rate and top of the leaderboards and things like that. And I thought that was the right thing to do to inspire people and make them look at me like I'm the best and I'm elite. And they're like, oh, wow, I want to be like that guy. But what I did without really knowing is I created this culture of like, people don't feel confident to ask for help. They don't want to look like an idiot by asking, just normal questions. So people kept them to themselves. They went through the struggles. I then got very frustrated. I'm like, why aren't these people asking for help? Why aren't they coachable? And really, actually, it just started with me. I just didn't set the right standards and kind of principles and things like that. And what happened is it just completely stalled and delayed a lot of the growth. And it was just, again, another expensive lesson,
On that, it's funny you say that, because one of the things I've introduced, and I did this in my last place, is like a sales enablement session that we have every fortnight. And the sales enablement session is basically an hour where we go through something. We all learn something, and it's scheduled, right? So we have it like built out for the next sort of like 8 weeks, all the different, lessons we're all going to learn. How in that last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a rep who I used to work with, who's very big on AI. So he's like a big advocate for AI and using AI in your sales to be more efficient and to work faster and streamline operations. He came in and did a session for us on AI in sales, right? So this is an ex-rep coming in, doing AI in sales for us and just talking to us about all the different tools we could use and where we could use them in our sales process and all that sort of good stuff. And a lot of the team took a lot from that. And then we also have internal reps running specific sessions as well. So we have a rep that's very good at some of like the demos, if you want to call it that, like workshops, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So doing workshops. So he has a session where he's going to take us all through his process and how he runs the workshops, why he does it in this specific way, and so on and so forth. Now, workshops is common across the team, but how this specific rep does it is pretty unique. He's taken it and run with it. So again, that sort of thing is super important to me. And I think I want the team to always see that. Like, it's good for them to see that I've got an ex-rep coming in talking about AI. He was the best AI guy in the team. Another guy coming in within the team talking to how he runs workshops. I'm sure in the next 3-4 months, this new hire, the new rep we brought into the business who's big on ROI, will be running an ROI session and telling everyone how he's delivered ROI and some of the wins he's had, that sort of thing. So again, I think it's super important for the team to see that we don't have all the answers. Our job is to facilitate and, again, as you say, build that elite sales team. So you can't do that on your own. You have to do that together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true, isn't it? It is so true. And I wrote down rep run the session. So I'm big on reinforcement. So when we run programs, it's not like, hey, one and done training, let's teach you how to do stakeholder mapping and then disappear. For me, it's a behavior change. If it's tenured reps, I probably need to like unsell them on the way they're doing it now that's not effective, and then resell them on the new way or the better way to close those skill gaps. And then weekly or bi-weekly enablement and reinforcement, coaching and stuff. And one of my reinforcement tools I use with the sales leader with their teams, like, right, here's like a reinforcement deck. So like, what's the skill? Why is it important? Slide 3 is like, here's an example of me doing it, like maybe a recording. And then here's a exercise. We're now going to do role play, but the rep's running it, not the enablement leader, not the sales leader. But what the sales leader is doing is picking a rep on the team that's really strong in that area. Yeah. And they're like, I need you to run this session. It's also good to see how those reps actually run those sessions, because they could be good for like those next levels up, like being a frontline manager and 100%. Being able to see how do they deliver a session, how can I work with this person to get them ready for a promotion, so I can scale and things like that. So I think having the reps get involved in that process is not just important. I think it's great for culture because it shows that you see value in them.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's really cool. Awesome. We had so much to get through, and I feel like we literally just spoke about the recruitment part, which I was kind of hoping, because I know it's something that you're really passionate about. So we'll definitely have to get you back to do some of the ramping and the progression stuff. But if we had to wrap up here, just like with one thing that you'd maybe give yourself some like early, I don't know, like go back to like your first day in the role, or maybe as a rep, or maybe your first day as a sales leader, like what would be like your golden bit of advice that you'd give yourself knowing what you know now?
So hasn't changed actually.
Okay.
So whilst I was an SDR, there is a specific. Obviously, I was looking for ways to learn. Right, I wanted to. It was my first time in business, first time as an SDR, etc. So I was just looking for ways to learn and ways to figure it out. And I stumbled across a motivational speaker called Jim Rohn, who he's passed away now. But like, there was one piece of advice that he gave and gives. Like, if you listen to any of his content, and he says you want to develop the habit of doing more than you get paid for. And for me, that has been the best business advice. So he speak. One of the reasons I listen to him is because he speaks in wisdoms. He's not. It's not always very specific, which I like. It's very,
Yeah.
if I don't know if you've read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist.
No,
It's
I've heard good things.
yeah, it's inspiring book written in fable form, that kind of thing. I love those types of books where they do speak in, you could say parables, philosophy, that sort of thing. Love that. Anyway, he says, you want to develop the habit of doing more than you get paid for. And I love that because what it did for me was not have an attitude of, oh, I'm not paid for that, so I'm not going to learn it. If I'm an SDR, so why am I going to learn the demo? I'm not an AE yet. When I'm an AE, I'll learn the demo. When I'm an AE, I'll learn how to do proposals. When I'm an AE, I'll learn how to. No, it so early on, it detached that for me. So my attitude was always just that of a sponge. I wanted to learn it all. It's like, so before I was in AE, I could demo the platform. And that helped me massively when I was an SDR because I could talk to the platform in detail when I was on call. So when I was handling objections, my objection handles sounded so detailed that yeah, again, I stood out, and it was one of the reasons I booked a lot, many more meetings. So for me, developing that habit of just doing more than you get paid for is something I still do today.
Yeah.
It's something I did when I was an SDR. When I was an AE and I wanted to become an enterprise AE, I started learning how to have those types of conversations with enterprise clients, not mid-market. And same for when I was an enterprise trying to lead people. Again, it's just like, if I have these frameworks, I can teach the frameworks, right? It's one of the core differences between, you could say, an IC and a leader is the frameworks, is you're clear on how you are delivering. And those frameworks is what helps you become a better leader, because that's what you can teach. If your way of working and your process is almost like, I don't know how I do it, I just do it. that's the challenge. And those are the AEs that tend to not be as successful as leaders, because there are many AEs who are good at winging it. They just don't necessarily know. They haven't codified their process for winning. So
Yes.
when they do win, don't get me wrong, but when they do get promoted to leadership, they just feel like, but I did it. You can do it too. It's like, just do it.
Yeah.
Do it the way I did it. Just and that doesn't necessarily work. It's the frameworks that separate, some like I see from a leader as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, the best advice that I still use to this day is developing the habit of doing more than you get paid for.
Yeah, I love that. You'll also find that you'll accelerate things as well, right? Like I
Yeah,
feel
that's
like I
it.
managed to accelerate my career because rightly or wrongly from like a well-being perspective or like whatever, I'm very passionate about what I do, so I find I never burn out. But like I would work ridiculous days and weeks, because I was like, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 60. I want to retire like by 40 and play golf every day, or try to play golf, right? So I'm like, how do I just like do this thing faster without cutting corners? And I would get into the office way before everybody else. I'd stay way later than everybody else. I'd come in at the weekend from time to time. I had a really good, I still do, like great partner that, was, understood that, gets, the way that I am. But yeah, like just go above and beyond. And like, if you're an SDR listening to this, the sales leader is trying to de-risk everything. So if they're going to promote you to AE, they're thinking about time to value, ramping you up. Again, like, can I get you producing quickly because I need you to? And I'm going to promote you if I can see that you're investing externally on like, demo courses or discovery courses, unless you've got the content inside the business. And I'm like, cool, like this person's not even AE now, but they can probably do a better demo than half of the AEs on my team. I feel like if I can just get you into conversations with customers and prospects, you can probably start doing technical conversations and running a workshop and, winning people over. Yeah, that feels like low risk to me.
Right.
Versus someone that's never done it before. Now I've got to take you through a whole set of new skills. I'm back against the wall because I'm pulled left, right, and center. I'm going to go and externally hire an AE instead. And I think that can make the difference between you getting the role and maybe not. So yeah, I love that piece of advice.
You are investing in your future. That's the way you have to see it. You have to see it as, yes, I'm getting there earlier than everyone else. Yes, I'm getting there later. Yes, I'm learning stuff I don't get paid for, but you're doing it all because you're investing in your future.
100%. That was such a killer session. I've got like nearly 3 pages of notes. We already covered like the top section. So we'll definitely have to get you back and talk about ramping up reps and talking about progression, because I know it's something, again, you're really, really passionate about, and it's a strength of yours. Is there anything you would, want to say to anyone listening about the upcoming role that you're recruiting for, and I guess where they can learn a little bit more?
Yeah. So, the reason why we're recruiting now is because of progression, actually. So, Bryn Gartland is now moving into an AE role. He started on the 1st of September. So this is day 2 for him. Okay. He just moved from an SDR to an AE role. If you go into the office now, his desk is like, he's got like what's he put there? Like a shrine of sorts, where like, it's like
amazing.
Bryn Gartland was here type of thing. So there's no one there. I'm like, he's literally just moved across desks to the Spectre team. So it's kind of, it was fun yesterday just seeing that there, but we're all proud of him. So yeah, that's the reason why we're recruiting now. So we're obviously trying to backfill that role. And yeah, what would I say? Street Group, we're the 4th fastest growing company in the Northwest. Prop tech company, still run by its co-founders who are super passionate about the space and the sector. They're very involved in the business. And what they've done is they've built, I just think it's remarkable what Tom and Heather have done, but they've built a truly remarkable business with a great culture that permeates right through the business. It's a culture of like transparency. Everyone is mucking in. We all can feel that we're building something special. So everyone in the business, mucks in and just gets involved. We all wear many hats. You might have a VP of sales title today, but you're helping out with marketing. This Saturday alone, we started wrapping gifts that we're sending out to all of our customers. And we did that on Saturday. It was all volunteers. So like a bunch of guys, we all came into the office and we were there just wrapping up these gifts that we're sending out to all of our customers as part of our 10-year anniversary. So so we're all there on Saturday, pretty much did the whole day, and we're all just hanging out. People brought their dogs in, but food was ordered, pizza, etc. So it was that kind of thing. But that's the culture of the business. So Tom and Heather have done a great job of building a brilliant business with a great culture. And then our job, obviously, within the sales team is to hold that, be the custodians of that, and then take that externally to customers and help customers understand why they should be working with us and should be partnering with us. Because obviously we've built a brilliant tech that makes their lives easier, makes them more efficient, and also allows them to provide a stellar customer experience to consumers, to landlords, tenants, and buyers alike. So yeah, lots of reasons to join us.
Love that. We'll make sure we put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can come and connect and reach out. It sounds like the perfect time to join. And yeah, today, super impressive. It sounds like you're a great leader, and I think a lot of people would get a lot of value working alongside you. It sounds like you take this stuff really seriously. So yeah, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us. And yeah, definitely have to get you back if you're up for it at some point to talk about ramping up and that whole progression piece. Because I think there's a lot of value to unlock there as well.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, James.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast.